What's up, you guys? Today's animated series review is about a group of mutants who struggle to find peace and acceptance within themselves and the society that surrounds them. And not to mention, they just happen to be my favorite group of heroes of all time, and I'm talking about the X-Men. X-Men the Animated Series aired in 1992, consisting of 5 seasons with a total of 76 episodes. The story focuses on a plethora of deep and emotional content based on social issues like divorce, religion, historical war timelines, inner conflict, and selective realistic health issues that were disguised as a plague for storyline purposes. However, it doesn't necessarily end there, as we do get subtle yet very impactful concepts involving time travel, media, protests, and slavery. The show doesn't waste any time, as we're immediately taken into the dark nature of humanity, mostly within New York, although being a worldwide dilemma, involving those who are against mutants, labeling them as outcasts, and insisting them to return back to where they came from. We are soon introduced to Jubilee, who is technically the last and youngest member to join the X-Men, as she's still learning her identity as both a human and mutant alongside her unaware powers. An attempt to capture her for termination by these giant robots known as Sentinels from the Mutant Control Agency led by Henry Peter Gyrick and Bolivar Trask. She is saved by the X-Men, and despite her doubts of accepting that her world is changing and wanting to keep her parents out of danger for precaution's sakes, she is welcomed with open arms into a special school for the gifted at the X-Mansion taught by the one and only Professor Charles Xavier. Within this time frame, adjusting to her new lifestyle, the X-Men do their best to justify their actions, wanting to prove their innocence to the public, but unfortunately in most occasions fail to do so. So in an attempt to clear their negativity associated with their powers or names, they infiltrate a top-notch facility by the Blackbird/X-Jet to obtain their secret files that are recorded against them. During this part, there's nothing but intense action left and right, leaving your eyes to be glued at all times in suspense. But when an evacuation occurs, the X-Men are forced to retreat due to being outnumbered by the Sentinels, and already within the first episode, a member of the team is caught and one is assumed to be left for dead. This, however, really sets the bar high in terms of the tone and future themes throughout the seasons. So within the X-Men lineup, you have CYCLOPS, Jean Grey, Wolverine, Storm, Gambit, Rogue, Beast, Jubilee, and MORPH, all under the supervision of Charles Xavier, otherwise known as Professor X, who uses his mind and cerebro to contact everyone and locate mutants. However, these are not the only characters to appear in the show, as we do get introduced to plenty more as the storyline progresses. Unfortunately, these characters were either once part of the X-Men but left due to differences, simply denied the invitation for the sake of having other priorities, or considered to join later on in the future. So within this particular group, you have Iceman, Nightcrawler, Colossus, Archangel, and Cannonball. But the list doesn't end there. You also have other characters that contributed to some key episodes like Cable, Bishop, Shard, Psylocke, and Banshee. And then you have some that were more associated within groups, such as the Shi'ar Empire, consisting of Lilandra along with Gladiator and his Imperial Guards, the Morlocks, consisting of various mutants led by Callisto, the Starjammers with Corsair, Chode, Raza, and Hepzibah, the X-Factor with members of Forge, Polaris, Havoc, Strong Guy, Quicksilver, Wolfsbane, and Multiple Man, the Alpha Flight with Gladiator/Vindicator, Sasquatch, Puck, Northstar, Aurora, Snowbird, and Shaman. And last but not least, the Orphanage, where you had kids like Tacky, Skids, Boom Boom, and Firefist. And if you really want to get technical, you also have more obscure allies like Maverick, Longshot, Dazzler, Scarlet Witch, Tusk, Watchdog, Random, Lady Gardner, Darkstar, Warlock, Byron Cali, Kazar, and Sabu. In regards to the human allies, you have Myra McTaggart, Amelia Vaught, an unknown female president who became suspicious of Gyrick and Trask's hidden agendas and actually shuts down their operations, and Senator Kelly, who was once against the mutants but later changed his mind after he became the president when realizing some are not all evil. Throughout the series, we're taken into the world of each individual character as we're shown just who they are exactly outside of their mutant abilities, involving origin storylines, love affairs, internal conflicts, family history, and childhood upbringings. For example, the love triangle between Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Wolverine are occasionally expressed within various episodes sporadically throughout the series. Despite showing the outcome, which in this case Cyclops wins, you really start to feel extremely bad for Wolverine. Not because it's his first time losing, but it's one of the many. and because of this, it really adds to his character growth and depth to his storyline as he searches for peace and love to cure his loneliness. One of the most pivotal storylines involves Genosha, an island where mutants are welcome to stay as a resort to protect and get away from the torture and danger. However, you soon learn that amongst Gambit, Storm, and Jubilee, who travel there for time off themselves, experience their stay differently, as Genosha is actually a place where mutants are held as hostages and slaves under the ruler of Master Mold, a giant sentinel, and once again Gyrich and Trask. This episode not only taught us how Storm deals with being claustrophobic, but we do get special cameos from many characters like Feral, Northstar, Aurora, Pyro, Thunderbird, Mystique, Sunfire, Slob, Domino, Richter, and many more. It's one of those episodes where you can't afford to blink as every scene is vital. So with that said, the reason this episode is important is because if these mutants were never free, then a lot of them wouldn't have been recruited for story purposes later on involving revolting and creating resistances alongside Magneto, which is its own crucial storyline that I'll get to later on. Speaking of Magneto, although he barely appears in the series at all, assuming he'd play more of a villain than anything else as a rival to the X-Men, but in this case it dives a lot deeper with his minor encounters. Looking at his point of view, his goal was to create justice and peace for all the mutants and provide a safe space for them to live in harmony away from the harsh reality humans were treating them with. However, his anger involving the death of his parents and wife during the war caused him to become bitter, thus wanting him to eradicate all humans in general rather than cohabitating with them as Professor X wanted. This unfortunately led an ongoing battle between the two. So in regards to the main villains, aside from Magneto you have Apocalypse and the Four Horsemen, Mr. Sinister, Mystique, Sabretooth, Juggernaut, Master Mold, and the Sentinels. Then you have more of the sideline groups like the Brotherhood consisting of Pyro, Avalanche, and Blob, the Nasty Boys with Slab, Ruckus, Vertigo, Hairbeck, and Gorgeous George, the Inner Circle Club with Emma Frost, Sebastian Shaw, Jason Wingard, Donald Pierce, and Harry Lalande, the TV production crew like Mojo, Spiral, and Major Domo, the Children of the Shadow consisting of Solar, Chet Lambert, and Toad, the Shi'ar Empire with Daken, Deathbird, and Eric the Red, the Acolytes consisting of various soldiers and Fabian Cortez, the Hounds consisting of unknown mutants and Caliban, the Savage Land with Sauron and other creatures. Then you have characters that briefly appeared like Lady Deathstrike, Omega Red, Talos, Nimrod, Garak, Shadow King, Silver Samurai, Black Tom Cassidy, Trevor Fitzroy, Arkin, External, and Immortus. Last but not least, you also have some human villains like Henry Peter Gyrich, Bolivar Trask, Cameron Hodge, Mr. Kilgrave, Grayton Creed Jr., and a special appearance by the Red Skull. One of the things I enjoyed about this show is the ongoing trial of Beast. As I mentioned earlier about a character being captured, it so happens to be this loving individual who is so pure at heart that no matter how many times he had the opportunity to escape jail, he proves to be a loyal and respectable mutant by waiting for his court date to justify his innocence. Not to mention, he's constantly appalled at many events throughout the show, saying fascinating at random moments and quoting numerous authors and poets. Because of this, Beast doesn't become free until the end of Season 1, making him absent for about 11 episodes. Next, you have MORPH, otherwise known as Changeling, the character whom we all assume to be dead. The show vaguely depicts the incidents on what happens to him, but later sheds the light as the seasons continue. You also see the care and loving bond between him and Wolverine as he took it the hardest and using most of his anger and grudge out on Cyclops for his decision to leave him behind. Due to trauma and PSD by the Sentinels and a little brainwashing by Mr. Sinister, MORPH partially decides to leave the X-Men until he recovers at Muir Island, the location of the largest mutant research center, thus making his return even better the next time around. Jubilee also had one of the funnier arcs, as no matter what the X-Men had to do at most cases, she was always told to stay behind. Her tantrums really showed her frustrations. Some of the best episodes this show had to offer were right within the first 3 seasons. They were all based off of popular comic book issues, but to my surprise, to include all the main and hard-hitting storylines early in the beginning was something I wasn't expecting, as it was just a lot to take in. For example, the events of time traveling involving Apocalypse and the Days of Future Past storyline already happens within the first season or so, and immediately shown the outcome of the X-Men by the year 2055. We get to see those who died in the X-Men cemetery and how Bishop time travels by the aid of Forge and Cable to stop the Sentinels and Apocalypse from overtaking the world, as this was all caused by the assassination of the president and a plague, which created a civil war. I won't say who did the assassination or created the virus, but the most suspenseful thing to watch was knowing how preventing one thing to occur can also affect another to unfold in a negative way, thus becoming a great mission to Bishop, Cable, Forge, Shard, and different versions of Wolverine to never give up until all is right and successful. A similar instance also turns up when they have to save a young Professor X from being assassinated in 1959. Next, you have the Phoenix and Dark Phoenix sagas, where they go deep into the transformation of Jean Grey merging into Phoenix as she's become the most indestructible force of nature. The balance between her attempt to fight it off is so incredibly written, as well as showing her sacrifice to save the X-Men. There's enough epic battles going on leaving you to not wanting to miss any bit of action because there are very fast-paced cameos within this episode that you can't afford to lose concentration on. Not to mention, the emotional turmoil within Cyclops having to let go of his loved one is extremely heartbreaking. This eventually causes a great pain of suffering and tension between every member of the X-Men as they all eventually start arguing with each other and contemplating if they want to leave the group needing personal space. Then you have episodes involving Professor X and Magneto as they enter the Savage Land trying to understand each of their motives while helping each other survive, which in my opinion wasn't all that fascinating. Despite being away from the X-Men for a while, this wasn't the first time it happened, as another storyline involved the X-Mansion being destroyed and Professor X disappearing once again. So throughout that arc, we get to see the rebuilding of the school until his return. However, some of the show's more darker themes involve Colossus and how he was trying to save his sister within his homeland during the Soviet Union attack, and Nightcrawler, who embraced Wolverine with a concept of religion and the importance of forgiving and believing in God. A huge breaking point of the show is the family dynamics portrayed within different characters throughout that are pretty sad and heartbreaking. For example, you have Cyclops and his father Corsair, Mystique with Rogue and Nightcrawler and a third sibling whom I won't spoil, Magneto with Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, and Professor X with his stepbrother Juggernaut. Then, regarding romances, you have Beast and his blind patient Carly Ann Crocker, Rogue and her ex-boyfriend Bobby and flirtatious Gambit, Wolverine and his many love interests like Jean Grey, Silver Fox, Lady Deathstrike, and briefly Storm, Iceman with Polaris, and last, Professor X with Myra, Amelia, and Lilandra. Because this show already touches on some diverse topics, another interesting one would have to be including the government alongside the United Nations. When trying to solve the crisis between humans and mutants, there also seems to be another anti-mutant organization called the Friends of Humanity, who are these secret hooded men with higher authority and attempt to persecute all mutants. Despite being created by Creed, who practically hates mutants the most, when you discover the real reason why he hates them is enough to leave you shocked. Then, to go into more of a scientific route, you have the episode where they show the origins of Mr. Sinister and his experiments of mutant genetics and how the hatred of mutants were forming earlier on in the past, touching up on subjects like natural selection by Charles Darwin. But who can forget the amazing cameos this show had to offer? As I mentioned earlier that you can't afford to blink while watching, this show briefly included many characters such as the Hulk, Captain Britain, Thor, Deadpool, Black Panther, the Avengers, Spider-Man, War Machine, Nick Fury, G.W. Bridges, Captain America in his attempt to stop the Nazis in World War II, Miss Marvel, The Punisher, Ghost Rider, Doctor Strange, Howard the Duck, Uatu the Watcher, and some Kree/Skrull soldiers. And to add a little bit more of nostalgia, certain episodes involving origin flashbacks shows the X-Men in their classic costumes as well as futuristic ones according to design of modern takes on the characters. But nothing will compare to the outfits used in this show, which were heavily inspired by the artwork of Jim Lee with their blue and yellow costumes. The X-Men also appeared in Spider-Man the Animated Series, as well as Storm appearing again during the show's final season. By the time you get to the end of the series, this is where things really start to lack but does its best to pick up the pace. The X-Men continue to battle many of the crucial villains preventing world domination, especially one being by Magneto, who creates a resistance group in a new world for mutants, and Apocalypse, who wants to become the ultimate being by capturing all the psychics. But unfortunately, the show decides to add a few terrible fillers like Mojo Vision, A Morlock Christmas, and Jubilee's Fairy Tale. By all means, you can absolutely skip these episodes as they are by far the worst and extremely unnecessary. The show unfortunately does something even worse to add on to its unfortunate fillers, and that is changing the graphics in the last season. The series had originally planned for 65 episodes, but given the success, Saban had ordered 10 extra episodes. Unfortunately, by that time, Marvel was heading into bankruptcy and the original company who had produced the series had already moved on to other projects in their pipeline. Therefore, Saban had to use his own money to fund the additional episodes using the same creators who produced the second season of Fantastic Four, the animated series. Hence why the animation style and character designs changed, but not for the best, as it's just absolutely hideous and lacks tremendous detail. On a side note, another thing that really ruined the flow of this show is the order of the episodes. There are actually two ways to watch the show, one in production order, as seen televised in syndication, and the other being the script order, which helps the continuity. This doesn't occur until mid-season 3, so be aware as you don't want to watch them out of order as it may confuse you. Because of production errors and delays, this pushed certain episodes back into different seasons. Due to this situation, the show had to speedrun its process, quickly putting out episodes until officially being cancelled. Thus, why the last episode ended pretty abruptly and felt it lacked the emotion it deserved. This show is filled with pure vengeance by many characters who had so many dilemmas involving their growth as an X-Men, a mutant, and as a human, with many themes like betrayal, heartbreak, sacrifice, patience, ego, anger, and acceptance. It's no wonder why it's considered one of the best shows to date. This series is also the second longest running Marvel animated series at the time, but later lost that title to the Ultimate Spider-Man the Animated Series in 2015. With euphemism, symbolic, and hidden meanings referencing to the ideas and concepts of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, there's just so much in-depth storytelling the show contains that it's really difficult to even put in words. However, one time doesn't do it justice, as this show requires to be watched a few times to really understand the layers of emotions given to each character and the responsibility they have as an X-Men. I've never seen such a show consuming so much knowledge and mind-blowing scenarios that it makes me wonder how kids of the 90s even understood the message of what was even happening. The action scenes are badass, the voice acting is superb, and the graphics take a bit of time to get used to with its vibrant colors and obscure creatures and designs. But it doesn't take away from the deep and dark storylines, and let's not forget the powerful theme song that will continue to replay in your head over and over again, considering it to be one of the best in cartoon history. Therefore, X-Men the Animated Series gets an A. Thanks for watching, give a like and subscribe for more animated series reviews, and stay tuned for the next episode.